This video offers a brief explanation for and of using MLA when writing research papers. There are three main areas I'll discuss in this video. The first is why use MLA. The second covers the basics of MLA but focuses only on containers, errors or misspellings in original sources, and quote integration. The third area this video covers is the Works Cited page, specifically when to use URLs and when not to. First, MLA stands for Modern Language Association, and it is a documentation style. Nearly all professions have some kind of documentation style, ranging from business to science to the arts to the legal profession. The disciplines of English, humanities, and liberal arts use MLA. Why use MLA or any other type of documentation style? These formatting styles are the root of all academic writing. Keep in mind that as scholars, we're in a conversation with other scholars by responding to, building upon, or refuting other scholars' works or arguments. We need comprehensible, verifiable ways to refer to each other's work, so we format our work in precise ways so that all scholars can quickly understand where to find our sources and perhaps even use our sources in their own research. Thus, this conversation continues and becomes larger and more nuanced. MLA and other documentation formatting is basically a common language that's shared by all members of the discipline that practices it. History, business, and fine arts use Chicago to Arabian style. Education, psychology, and science use APA or American Psychological style. Engineers, computer science, and information technology professionals use IEEE or the formatting style of the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers. And, as I said earlier, English, humanities, and languages and literature professionals use MLA. Why do students need to learn MLA, or any other formatting style for that matter? Just like learning the conventions of any type of writing, like literacy narratives or literary analyses, allows you the knowledge to adapt those conventions for other writing types, like research writing, learning documentation styles trains your mind and prepares you to look out for, recognize, and use the conventions used in any professional field. All professional fields expect their members to adhere to their field-specific writing and documentation conventions. On my screen, you can see the cover of the MLA Handbook, 8th edition. If you don't have an MLA Handbook, I strongly encourage you to get one, whether a digital copy, which is the one you see here, it is my Apple book, or a hard copy. And you can see the table of contents. You can just quickly jump to whatever it is you need. So as you can see, an MLA handbook will give you lots more information than what I'm presenting here in this video. However, you can also get a good grammar book that has a healthy section on MLA, or for whatever reason you cannot get either of these books, you can refer to the Purdue OWL for grammar and writing advice, and both the Purdue OWL and TCCD's MLA cheat sheet to help you. Whatever you decide, find a resource that best suits your needs and use it frequently. Second, MLA uses the concept of containers to refer to the larger item of information being documented. The rest of the information simply describes that container. So with MLA, a book that's a collection of essays or chapters is the container and typically italicized, while the individual chapter from that book is information that describes that container. Look at this example of the episode called Hush in the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The name of the larger container, in this case, the television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, is in italics. The name of the smaller item, in this case the episode named Hush, is in quotation marks. All this other information, created by Joss Whedon, performance by Sarah Michelle Gellar, Season 4, the specific season that this episode Hush appears in, and the number of that episode, which is episode 10, all of that information simply describes this larger container of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The next thing I want to talk about is alterations or quotations. For errors in words or titles or anything that you think might be unclear to your readers and that are in the original source you're documenting, you always spell it the way it's originally spelled, even with that error. However, in cases of error, you want to indicate that that error comes from the original source and not from you. So you include the word sick immediately after that error. Sick, as you can see here, is an English word. That's why it is not italicized. And that word stands for the Latin word thus or so. Included here, as in this example, shall admit it, comma, opening quotation mark, nothing can extinguish my interest in Shakespeare, closing quotation mark, sick. Sick is used because Shakespeare's name is misspelled. There's an error here. So when there's an error, or if you are emphasizing something, as in this example here, Lincoln specifically advocated a government, opening quotation mark, for the people, closing quotation mark, emphasis added, you put either sick or emphasis added in parentheses to indicate that the change, in this case, it is an error, misspelled Shakespeare, and in this case, the only word emphasized here, which is italicized, is the word for. You are letting your readers know that you added that emphasis. It didn't appear in the original source. Now, when you're doing this, be sure to use a phrase like this, emphasis added. Do not use the words my emphasis or emphasis mine, because academic writing should be in third person point of view. So instead, use this phrase emphasis added, and be sure to use parentheses. And this is only if you are altering a quotation or you are highlighting that something is misspelled. So if there's an error or misspelling in a title or in the original quote, you can put sick in those parentheses, or if you're altering, in this case, highlighting, emphasizing by using italics, put emphasis added. Now, there may come a time where you need to, or you wish to omit a word, a phrase, or a sentence from a passage you are directly quoting. So, the last thing I want to talk about with regards to quotations is if you decide to omit a word, phrase, or sentence from the quote you're citing, be sure to adhere to these two principles. 1. Never present your quotation in such a way that your readers can misunderstand the sentence structure of the original source. And 2. Always be fair to the author you're quoting and to your own integrity as a writer and to your writing. So make sure you adhere to those two principles. Notice in this example about medical thinking, the quotation keeps the original source's sentence structure intact. Here's the original quote. Medical thinking, trapped in the theory of astral influences, stressed air as the communicator of disease, ignoring sanitation of visible carriers. And that comes from Barbara W. Tuchman's A Distant Mirror, The Calamitous 14th Century. But the writer decides to directly quote this passage, but decides this phrase, which is a dependent clause, this phrase, trapped in theory of astral influences, isn't necessary to their quote. So here is when the writer uses an ellipses. In surveying various responses to plagues in the Middle Ages, Barbara W. Tuchman writes, quote, medical thinking, ellipses, stressed air as a communicator of disease, ignoring sanitation or visible carriers. This phrase right here, trapped in the theory of astral influences, is simply a dependent clause giving more information about medical thinking. The author who quotes this decides that this dependent clause is not necessary in their in their direct quotation, so they use ellipses. That is a visual cue to readers that the author has deliberately omitted words or a word or a sentence from their direct quotation to make their own quotation, their direct quotation, and their own sentence strong and concise. Notice how the ellipses does not change the sentence structure and therefore does not change the meaning of the original quote. I want to point something else out to you too with regards to integrating quotation marks. Always have a signal phrase or an author tag. In this case, by including Barbara W. Tuchman right here, the author is using an author tag. We find out that the verb writes. Who writes that? Barbara W. Tuchman. So make sure you include an author tag when you are quoting or integrating a source. A signal phrase is the author tag or this verb right here, writes. You don't want to just simply drop a quotation without any kind of anchor that an author tag or signal phrase uses. We also have this first part in surveying various responses to plagues in the Middle Ages. That gives the readers more information about why that author has decided to use this direct quote. Think of a peanut butter and jam sandwich when you're integrating quotes. The top slice of bread should be a sentence that gives your readers a clue about the importance of the direct quote you're bringing in. The jam is the direct quote itself, and then the bottom slice of the bread is your reflection on that quote. Why did you use that quote? It's not necessarily a summary of the quote, but a reflection, and it points to the importance and the significance of that quote to your overall argument. In a good MLA handbook or grammar book, you can also see other examples of when and how to use an ellipses, say at the ending of a sentence or when it precedes a parenthetical citation. Finally, I want to point out the placement of this period. The period should appear outside of a parenthetical citation in text citation. If you put the period here at the ending of or right at the ending of the sentence, whether or not you use an ellipses, and before the closing quotation marks, the page numbers right here become unanchored, and then it becomes unclear to your readers to where do those page numbers belong. Do they belong to the previous sentence or the following sentences? So to clear things up for your readers, in text citations only, put the period outside of the closing parentheses, the way it is here. Finally, let's look at works cited. Before we jump into works cited, though, I'm going to show you quickly how to access sources from the TCCD libraries. So you're on the TCC webpage, and you want to scroll all the way down to the bottom and go to libraries. And as you can see, a lot of good information for you. If you notice this little text icon, that means you can chat with a librarian. Sometimes they're available or sometimes they're working with the student. Because we're about to go into Halloween, I'm going to search for Halloween, and I'm going to do a very large search. So I'm just typing in Halloween in the search box and then click search. And as you notice, quite a few resources pop up, including the iconic movie Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis. But I want to look for peer-reviewed journals only, so I'm going to click on this. Now it's important to note that even though you clicked peer-reviewed, not everything is peer-reviewed. And even though it's listed under peer-reviewed, not everything is peer-reviewed. So you have to credibly assess the resources. So I'm going to click on this one, Halloween Organization and the Ethics of Uncanny Celebration. And the reason I am deliberately picking a peer review article is because I want to show you how to access the MLA citation button and the DOI. First, and I cannot stress this enough, when you construct your works cited page, it should be in alphabetical order. And that alphabetical order depends on the first item of each container. Usually that means the author's last name. But if there is no author provided, then the container's first item of information will be the first major word of the title, whether it's a chapter or essay title or the container's title itself. Again, remember, container is the larger item. Think of a plastic container box. The container holds all these items you put in there, whether it's Halloween decorations or any other kind of items, blankets, winter clothes, anything else. All of those individual items are like the individual items of information within the larger container of a book, a collection of essays, or a television series with individual episodes. So this is the container that I'm looking at, Halloween Organization and the Ethics of Uncanny Celebration. And it is a peer-reviewed journal. We can see right here, usually journals that have the word journal in there, chances are very high they are peer-reviewed. Do not simply copy and paste this information and use it in your works cited page. It is not MLA, and everything must be an MLA. So if you come over here to the Cite button, and depending on the database that you use, the Cite button may appear at the top or it may be at the side. Click on the Cite button, and you will see a whole bunch of documentation style. Scroll down to MLA, and you can copy and paste this into your text. However, a couple of things I want you to be aware of. Still double check to make sure that it's correct MLA. I can tell right here it is not correct MLA only because MLA, everything is double spaced. This is not double spaced. Number two, the other thing I want to tell you is make sure you change the font so that your font in the entire essay is consistent from works cited to the pagination that appears in the upper right hand corner to the body of your essay itself. It should all be the same consistent font. Use the DOI. DOI stands for Digital Object Identifier. The DOI is stable. It is a permanent identification number. Use this, always use this when you are able to use it. And if you notice, MLA citation, the DOI appears at the last. We have DOI, actually almost to the last, because there's something that's missing here too to make it correct MLA. It appears almost at the last. The other thing that's missing is the date accessed. You should always have access date, and you will literally write accessed and then the date, say 25 July, spell out all of July, and then the year 2020. Do not use JUL, do not use July 25, 2020. It should be the date, 25 or the 1st, whatever the date is you actually accessed it, the month fully spelled out, and then the year in which you access the source, followed by a period. So there are two things wrong with this citation. So that's why it's important to always double check, even if you copy and paste. Do not copy this entire URL and put that in your works cited page for two reasons. One, that URL is not stable. It changes. Every time a database is updated with new information, this URL will change. So it will hurt your integrity if you put that URL in your works cited and your readers click on that URL and they are not taken to the actual source that you're using. Your integrity and your credibility as the writer and as an author are severely damaged. So do not copy and paste this URL. The second reason you don't put this long, unwieldy URL is it's aesthetically unpleasing. It will mess up your documentation format, and that can tire your readers' eyes when they're simply trying to find the location of your source. So use the DOI when it is available. If the DOI is not listed here in the citation box, you can go back to the information when you first found it and scroll down and see it here. DOI, and this is the number that you would post near the ending of your work citation page. If the DOI is not listed here, then you use the URL. But again, not this long, unwieldy URL. Instead, let's go back to the article itself. Not this long, unwieldy URL. Instead, you will just use ebscohost.com. Do not type in HTTPS. Any of the URLs you use, if it's a website or an online blog, do not use HTTPS : // So for this URL, you only use the URL for a peer-reviewed article if there is no DOI. Do not type in the HTTPS. Do not type in this web-b-. Do not type in .ezp.tccd.edu. All you do is use ebscohost-com. That's all you use. Now, to get that TCCD MLA cheat sheet, go back to the library page, library homepage, and click on Tutorials and Academic Support. Scroll down and click on Styled Citation. You will be given options for multiple citation. Click MLA 8th edition, and it is a PDF you can download and save. Since you will probably be using primarily online sources, you can scroll down past this big empty space and then use information from here, like the library subscription services, which are the databases. And you can see how you cite it. Okay, from magazines to journals to newspaper articles to reference book, there's all this information here. I hope this has helped you. And again, this is just a brief overview of why and how to use MLA. A good grammar book with MLA or the MLA 8th edition handbook itself offers much more information.